Hello, my name is Brydges. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 31 years now, and I'm proud to have been an attorney, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished during my career in the practice of law. My father was an attorney, and I learned a lot from him. From the time I was shelving books on Saturday afternoons in his law library, through the years I practiced with my father, and in the years I practiced on my own, I've learned a lot of things. The most important thing that I've learned is that truth and justice are sacred and beautiful things. And the pursuit of truth and justice is a wonderful way to make a living. Now, my career up to this point has been varied. I've practiced in civil litigation, labor law. Mostly I've concentrated on dispute resolution, be it through arbitration, negotiation, mediation, or in the courts. And I've spent a lot of time in Chancery Court as a construction attorney. In many ways, I look back on my career and I realize that it's all been leading up to where I am right here, right now. Because where I am right here, right now, is foreclosure defense law. Residential foreclosure defense law, as we know it today, is a new field of law. Really only come about in the last 2 years, since September 2008, when the so-called housing bubble collapsed. You see, people, we are in the aftermath of what will go down as the greatest financial crime in history. A crime from which a very small number of people profited enormously. Trillions of dollars. What they did was artificially inflate the value of American real estate by providing greater and greater incentives to originators and greater and easier access to money that was being provided by the investors to whom they were selling the mortgage-backed securities. As they sold more mortgage-backed securities, more money came into the system and the price of housing went up more. As the price of housing went up more, the mortgage-backed securities looked more attractive and they sold more, which brought more money into the system, which further inflated housing prices. About 131% in the 10-year period between 1998 and 2008. The more money that came in, the better the investment that looked, the more money that came in. There's another name for a financial scheme of this nature. It's called a Ponzi scheme. And this was the greatest Ponzi scheme of all time. To perpetrate this Ponzi scheme, these Wall Street investors needed two things. They needed your signature, the homeowner, your signature on a note, a promissory note, and a mortgage. That's all. And that was absolutely necessary. So they did anything to get your signature on a promissory note and a mortgage. The originators that you dealt with, the Countrywides, the Taylor Beans, were given, and all the other originators were given enormous incentives to do whatever it took to get your name, your signature on a note and mortgage. You see, people, it really didn't matter whether to these people whether you would default on this note or mortgage. In fact, as it turned out, came to their benefit if you were to default. Because you see, at the same time that these Wall Street banks were selling these mortgage-backed securities to investors, they were buying credit default swaps, the so-called derivatives that you've heard of, which are essentially an insurance policy, a bet, a gamble. A gamble that these mortgage packages would fail, that there would be a large number of defaults. So eventually, around 2006, it seems like, from what we're gathering, it became to these people's interest to actually get notes and mortgages where there was a likelihood that you would default. Either that when the adjustable rate kicked in 2 years, you would not be able to refinance, or some hidden charges, or that the home was so grossly overvalued that eventually you would realize that it made no sense to continue to pay on say a $300,000 note on a $200,000 home. So you see, people, there was a crime that was committed, massive numbers of crimes committed by a lot of people. And it wasn't the homeowners of our country that caused the mortgage collapse. It wasn't the homeowners of our country that committed liar loans or fraudulent loans. It was the Wall Street banks and the loan originators and the appraisers and the others and this conduits that perpetrated this fraud, this crime upon the American people. And now, many of them received bailout money. And you know where that bailout money came? It came from the taxes paid by the victims of their crimes. Well, there's two things that these people didn't take into account, and that is the truth and justice. And that is where we and the justice system come in, is that we will pursue truth and the justice, and we will show, and we can show, where there was unlawful incentives that were given. There was unlawful inducements into entering into the note and mortgage, that there were phony appraisals, that the appraisals, that they knew the appraisals were phonies, that there was abuses in the servicing of the loans, and there have been abuses in the foreclosure process. You've heard of the robo-signing scandals and the things of that nature. Well, let me tell you, from practicing law since the very beginning in the mortgage foreclosure, this new field of law called residential mortgage foreclosure defense, I've been practicing since the very beginning, and I'm seeing more and more coming out every day, and the worm is starting to turn, as the phrase goes. You see, we're starting to come out with more and more of the politicians are now jumping on board, and so we're having investigations. I want to read something to you from a recent press release just the other day from the Attorney Generals Eric Schneiderman of New York and Bo Biden of Delaware. These are two of the state's these are the highest legal officers of their states. And Delaware is a state where there's a lot of corporations, a lot of corporations are incorporated, including MERS. And New York is obviously a state where all these Wall Street banks are located, and most importantly, where all the trust, where these mortgage-backed securities were placed. You see, your mortgage is probably not held by Wells Fargo or Citibank or JP Morgan Trust. It's probably held by a New York trust. And Wells Fargo or Deutsche Bank or Citi or US Bank or Bank of America are probably just servicers of your mortgage. And the real mortgage, the real note, were probably placed into a trust, because that was where the mortgage-backed securities were issued from, was a New York trust. And Eric Schneiderman, the Attorney General of New York, is after truth and justice, and he's issued subpoenas. And Bo Biden, who is the Attorney General in Delaware, has filed a lawsuit against the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, which was an entity set up by the banks to avoid recording, so that we avoid a public recording of the transfers of your note and mortgage. And I want to read something to you that was recently published by them, and it says as follows: America's free markets work only when there's one set of rules for everyone, and everyone plays by those rules. It is clear now, however, that many in the mortgage finance industry ignored these rules over the past decade. This led to a breakdown in our housing market and in the market for mortgage-backed securities. These two markets are inextricably linked. Any real effort to repair the damage caused by the collapse of the housing bubble must address the injury of both sectors. So you see, these two attorney generals are leading an effort and being followed hopefully by the other 48 state attorney generals to conduct a widespread investigation. And the investigation is, for a purpose that is important for us, is first, we are investigating misconduct by loan originators, banks and other lenders engaged in patterns. I mean patterns of deceptive conduct when they made mortgage loans across the country. Also, they are examining the continuing abuses in the servicing of millions of mortgages. And last, they are the clearest example of the gross levels of misconduct during this process was the use and abuse of, these are their words, the Frankenstein monster of a recording system called the Mortgage Electronic Registration System. You see, people, after 2 years now, we're finally getting some action from our politicians. And what that means is that the cases that I've been arguing in court for the past 2 years, the judges are starting to listen, and they're going to have to listen, and things are starting to turn. We can defend the foreclosure action. I'm not going to get your home for free. Don't hire me because we think you're going to get the mortgage thrown out. We can get the mortgage brought into question. We can get the mortgage thrown out. That is, dismissed. But that's not what we're about. You do own the home, and you should stay in the home, and you should not give up the home. But you do need to pay a reasonable cost to stay in the home. The American people deserve a full investigation and public exposure of the conduct that got us into this economic quagmire we face. We must ensure that it never happens again, and we must restore public confidence that ours is a nation committed to to the goal of equal justice for all. And that's what we are committed for in my firm, Lou Brydges and Associates. You see, people, what we're really fighting over is the land. It's always been about the land. It always will be about the land. That's why it's been called the Battle of Evermore. It's always been about the land, and it always will be about the land. So I want to just tell you, whether you hire me or not, just remember one thing. Never, never, never give up the land. And we have three things going for us in this battle. And with these three things, we can prevail. The three things we have are truth and justice, and that we will never, never, never surrender the truth and justice. And when the truth and justice comes out, we will prevail. So thank you. And the segments on this website, this is the introduction to my website. On the other segments, I'm going to be covering different areas of the law and different options and going into more detail about what you can expect if you were to hire our firm. We're going to keep you abreast of developments in the field of foreclosure defense, residential foreclosure defense, and we're going to be adding to this website 3 or 4 videos every month. And I invite you to come back and join the website. We provide free consultations, and our staff is ready and available to answer any and all questions you might have about our firm and what we do. So thank you, and I invite you to enjoy this website and give us your comments in the section provided for such, and send in questions you might have, and provide your information, and use this website and call us. And but just remember, never, never, never give up the land.